Good evening, everyone. This is your Sir Jasper, and welcome to Virtual English. For today's lesson, we will learn about the definition of abstract, the importance of writing an abstract for academic and professional purposes, the common format in writing or composing your abstract, the 6 steps to follow in order to write an effective scientific abstract, and what are the 4 different types of abstract. Now, let's begin our discussion by knowing first the definition of abstract. So, what is an abstract? An abstract is a succinct summary of a longer piece of work, usually academic in nature, which is published in isolation from the main text and should therefore stand on its own and be understandable without reference to the longer piece. It is an original work, not an excerpted passage. An abstract, therefore, must be fully self-contained and make sense by itself, without further reference to outside sources or to the actual paper. It highlights key content areas, your research purpose, the relevance or importance of your work, and the main outcomes. It is a well-developed single paragraph of approximately 250 words in length, which is indented and single-spaced. The function of the abstract is to outline briefly all parts of the paper. Although it is placed at the beginning of your paper, immediately following the title page, the abstract should be the last thing that you write once you are sure of the conclusions you will reach. But why is it important to write an abstract then? Because abstracts are important for both selection and indexing purposes. Let's start with selection. Abstracts allow readers who may be interested in the paper to quickly decide whether it is relevant to their purposes and whether they need to read the whole paper. For indexing, most academic journal databases accessed through the library enable you to search abstracts. This allows for quick retrieval by users. Abstracts must incorporate the key terms that a potential researcher would use to search. And when is it necessary to write abstracts? Abstracts are usually required for submission of articles to journals. By the way, what is a journal? An academic or scholarly journal is a periodical publication in which scholarship relating to a particular academic discipline is published. Academic journals serve as permanent and transparent forums for the presentation, scrutiny, and discussion of research. They are usually peer-reviewed or refereed. That's also an essential element in your professional for professional purposes. Another is it is also required for application for research grants. Why is it necessary for you to acquire research grants? Because having one will boost your professional career. You will also gain a unique experience abroad since your research will be presented internationally. You may be even awarded during an annual congress. And lastly, you will get a financial remuneration. An example would be you can get 25,000 US dollars for a year. So that's the importance of writing an abstract or writing an article. Another, abstracts are also required for completion and submission of thesis. Thesis is also an important requirement in college. By the way, what is a thesis? It is a long essay or dissertation involving personal research written by a candidate, which is required for a college degree. And lastly, abstracts are a must for submission of proposals for conference papers. So what is a conference paper? Conference papers refer to articles that are written with the goal of being accepted to a conference, typically an annual or biannual venue with a specific scope where you can present your results to the community, usually as an oral presentation, a poster presentation, or a table discussion. So it is also quite achievement if you also create abstract having this kind of goal. Now that you already know the importance of writing an abstract, let's move on to the format of an abstract. The format of your abstract will depend on the discipline in which you are working. However, all abstracts generally cover the following 5 sections. First one is the reason for writing. So you're going to answer what is the importance of your research? Why would a reader be interested in the larger work? Second, it's the problem should be present, meaning what problem does this work attempt to solve? What is the scope of the project? What is the main argument, thesis, or claim? Thirdly, we have methodology. An abstract of a scientific work may include specific models or approaches used in the larger study. Other abstracts may describe the types of evidence used in the research. The fourth one is the result. An abstract of a scientific work may include specific data that indicates the results of the project. Other abstracts may discuss the findings in a more general way. And lastly, we have implications. So, how does this work add to the body of knowledge on the topic? Are there any particular or are there any practical or theoretical applications from your findings or implications for future research? So those are the common formats, 5 formats of writing an abstract. Now let's move on to the 6 easy steps in writing an abstract. The key trick in writing your abstract is to plan your argument in 6 sentences and then use these to structure the entire thesis or paper or essay. The 6 sentences are as follows. We have the first one, introduction. In one sentence, what's the topic? Here, you have to phrase it in a way that your reader will understand. Your readers are examiners. Assume they are familiar with the general field of research. So you need to tell them specifically what topic your thesis addresses. They know the background work, but they want to know specifically what topic your paper covers. Second, state the problem you tackle. What's the key research question? Again, in one sentence. Remember, your first sentence introduced the overall topic. So now you can build on that and focus on one key question within that topic. If you can't summarize your thesis, paper, or essay in one key question, then you don't yet understand what you're trying to write about. Keep working on this step until you have a single, concise, and understandable question. Thirdly, you have to summarize in one sentence why nobody else has adequately answered the question or the research question yet. For a PhD thesis, you'll have an entire chapter covering what's been done previously in the literature. Here, you have to boil that down to one sentence. But remember, the trick is not to try and cover all the various ways in which people have tried and failed. The trick is to explain that there's this one particular approach that nobody else tried yet. But here, you're phrasing it in such a way that it's clear, it's a gap in the literature. So use a phrase such as previous work has failed to address. Fourthly, explain in one sentence how you tackle the research question. In other words, what's your big new idea? or what's the new perspective you have adopted, or what's your overall view on the question you introduced in step 2. For the fifth step, you answer the question in one sentence. How did you go about doing the research that follows from your big idea? Did you run experiments? Did you build a piece of software? Carry out case studies? This is likely to be the longest sentence, especially if it's a PhD thesis. After all, you're probably covering several ways worth of research. But don't overdo it. Remember, the word abstract means a summary of the main ideas, with most of the detail left out. So feel free to omit detail. And the last step is, in one sentence, you have to answer the question, what's the key impact of your research? Here, we're not looking for the outcome of an experiment. We're looking for a summary of the implications. What does it all mean? Why should other people care? What can they do with your research? After knowing the 6 easy steps to write a scientific abstract, let us now familiarize ourselves with the different types of abstracts. There are actually 4, and the first one is descriptive abstract. From the word itself, descriptive, this type of abstract describes the work being abstracted. They are more like an outline of the work and are usually very short. There are only 100 words or less. This kind of abstract gives a very general idea of what the writing is about. It is like a slightly extended title or a topic sentence in an introduction. A descriptive abstract will look something like this. The research analyzes the different approaches to reducing traffic congestion in the UK and provides conclusions and recommendations for future implementation. Here, the given sample summarizes what the article or what the research is all about. The second one is informative abstracts. This kind of abstracts act as substitutes for the actual papers as all the key arguments and conclusions are presented, specifically the context and importance of the research, reasons for methods, principal results, and conclusions. Moreover, an informative abstract is made up of 4 parts. The first is the purpose. The purpose section of an informative abstract should state either the reason for or the primary objectives of the experiment or investigation. The purpose section of an informative abstract might also contain the hypotheses of the experiment. Second is the methodology. The methodology section of an informative abstract should describe the techniques used in conducting the experiment. This section should give only as much detail as is necessary to understand the experiment. The abstract should not focus entirely on research methods unless that is the primary focus of the original document. Third is the results. The results section of an informative abstract should relate the observations and or data collected during the experiment. This section should be concise and informative, and only the most important results need to be included. And lastly, conclusion. The conclusion section of an informative abstract should state the evaluation or analysis of the experiment results. It should also briefly state the implications of these results. This conclusion section may also state whether the driving hypothesis of the experiment was correct. The following is an example of an informative abstract. Subjects' car clocks were set 10 minutes in order to determine if deliberately setting a clock ahead will reduce lateness. One group of subjects knew their clocks had been set ahead, while a second group of subjects was not informed of the change. Over a 4-week period, the subjects who were aware of The clock change regularly arrived on time or late for their scheduled appointments. Over the same period of time, the subjects who were unaware of the clock change tended to arrive early or on time for their appointments. Data suggests that intentionally setting a clock to run fast does not reduce lateness because one accounts for that extra time in his or her schedule. Here, in this given sample, it gives the methodology as well as the results and conclusion of the given approach. Third is the indicative abstract. If you are writing an abstract for a less structured document like an essay, editorial, or book, you will write an indicative abstract. An indicative abstract is generally made up of three parts. The first is scope. The scope section of an indicative abstract should state the range of the material dealt within the original document as well as the starting premise of the document. An abstract for an essay on Shakespeare's comedies, for example, would state that the bard's comedies make up the focus of the essay. Secondly, the arguments used section of an indicative abstract should state the main arguments and counter arguments employed in the original document. These arguments should be stated in the same progression in which they appear in the document. Not all documents contain a progression of arguments. In some cases, this section may outline analysis or plot progression instead. Lastly, the conclusions section of an indicative abstract should state the document's main closing argument and its implications as suggested by the original author. This conclusion section might also state plot resolution when the original document is a work of fiction. Here is an example of an indicative abstract. Types of female power in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice are discussed. Mrs. Bennet and Charlotte Lucas represent the lack of power possessed by married women of the middle class. Lady Catherine and Caroline Bingley demonstrate the power of wealthy, single women to occasionally flaunt rules of etiquette. Lydia Bennet represents the risk of female power when bestowed upon too immature a woman, but Elizabeth and Jane Bennet characterize the positive personal and social effects of women who recognize their own power over self. And lastly, we have graphical abstract. A graphical abstract is a single, concise, pictorial, and visual summary of the main findings of the article. This could either be the concluding figure from the article or a figure that is specially designed for the purpose, which captures the content of the article for readers at a single glance. A graphical abstract should allow readers to quickly gain an understanding of the main take-home message of the paper and is intended to encourage browsing, promote interdisciplinary scholarship, and help readers identify more quickly which papers are most relevant to their research interests. Authors must provide an image that clearly represents the work being described in the paper. A key figure from the original paper summarizing the content can also be submitted as a graphical abstract. In relation to this type, I will also introduce to you an IELTS writing task 1, which refers to interpreting a certain kind of graphic organizer. I'm going to talk about that topic. I'm going to talk that topic in our next episode. An example is an image that presents layer by layer capsules for magnetic resonance imaging and drug delivery. This is by Hua Ai, which comes from the Advanced Drug Delivery Reviews. So this is an example of a graphical abstract. And that ends our virtual lesson on Flipped Classroom. I hope you learned a lot from today's online discussion. If there are any questions, feel free to raise them in class, and I will do my best to entertain your queries. So again, this is your Sir Jasper. See you tomorrow and have a great evening.